healing. Okay, Boker Tov. So we today, of course, we're going to continue a little bit with the laws of Hanukkah. Also, this is a special day. I don't know if you noticed. I don't know if you were here, but on Shabbat it's Yud Tet Kislev. That means today is Yud Chet. Today is Yud Zayin Kislev. What's special about Yud Zayin Kislev? Nothing. But there's something special about Yud Tet Kislev. It's become it's a relatively new holiday. It's not in your charts. It's not in part of the basic Jewish calendar. But in recent years, it's become more and more popular. Everybody has one, or for somebody that comes later. It's a holiday which became popular with the Hasidic movement. The Hasidic movement, we have to discuss what that is. What I'd like to do is look at our charts of the 7 periods, historical framework of events. Boker Tov.
I'm so sorry. I forgot that thing. Are you going to, for your son, are you going to see him this Shabbat?
I am.
Okay. I'll try and get it before we have our thing at 2 now.
Perfect then. Great. Yes. So we've been focusing in on period 2 and period 3 and 4, right? 3 and 4. Because period 3, that's when we had the Hanukkah events. You see that in your Jewish events? See Hanukkah's there, the Hasmoneans at the end of the Second Temple era. And then we said that really, and in the Jewish leadership, we spoke about Shimon HaTzadik being the last remnants of the men of the Great Assembly. You see where I am in the chart? In the period 3 in the middle, Shimon HaTzadik, we saw in Pirkei Avot how he is the link in the chain. And the tradition tells us that he's the one. I don't think I even told you the full story, but now's the time. He went out to greet Alexander the Great. The story goes like this. When Alexander the Great came to conquer Israel, he came to Yaffo, like most people did, through the sea. And Shimon HaTzadik, together with all the elders, he said, "Come with me." And he went out from Jerusalem and journeyed towards the great conqueror. And Alexander already was well known as an amazing conqueror. And as he was approaching, he sees this rabbi approaching him, and the tradition tells us that he wore the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. He must have been a Kohen, Shimon. Didn't know that, but he wore the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. And when Alexander the Great sees him, he gets off his horse and he bows down in front of Shimon HaTzadik. And this is the great conqueror of the entire world, bowing down to this rabbi, to this Jew in Israel. And so his cohorts say to him, "What is going on here? What, have you lost your mind? What are you doing?" Alexander was like 30 years old, conquering the whole world. And he was bowing down to this old rabbi. Apparently, he said to his friends, "You don't understand. Whenever I go out to battle, my world empire, conquering the world, the night before the battle, I have a dream. And in my dream, I see this picture of a man who says you're going to be successful. And it's him." So this is, I think, our sage's way of telling us that don't think that there was animosity between the Greeks, the Greek conquerors, and the Jews from the get-go. It didn't have to be all sour. Of course, we're celebrating the victory of the Jews over the Greeks. Hanukkah is coming. But that's, as I took pains to explain to you earlier, that actually is a later development. For the first 150 years or so, when the land of Israel was under the rule of the Ptolemaic Greeks, right? The Greek Empire was divided between the three generals. The Egyptian Greeks, they were more tolerant. Of course, they had a tremendous influence on the entire culture everywhere, and the whole world was influenced by Greek culture. But at the beginning, there was an attempt to somehow blend, somehow be able to appreciate the good things that the Greek culture is teaching us, whether it's architecture or forms of government or appreciation of beauty. A lot of things that were positive about the Greek culture that they had to give to the world. What does it say in Bereshit? Noah had three sons. Anybody remember what their names were?
Shem, Yafet, Ham.
Exactly, Shem, Ham, and Yafet. And we are descendants of Shem. And the Greeks are descendants of Yafet. And after the third son, Ham, commits a crime against his father, he gets cursed out, but the other two get blessings. And the blessing given to Yafet is Yaft Elokim liyefet. Yafet is like the language of Yafeh. There should be beauty for Yafet. For the Greeks should have beauty. V'yishkon be'olei Shem. And they can dwell in the tents of Shem. So from the Torah, there seems to be a prophecy that somehow there can be the beauty of Greece living together in harmony with the Torah, with the Jews, with the people of Shem, who of course Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are coming from Shem. So at first it was like that, and it had a very nice beginning with Shimon HaTzadik meeting and so this started off the respectful, you could say even cross-pollination between the Greek wisdom and the Torah, the Jewish wisdom. There's even a halacha that you're allowed to write a Sefer Torah in Greek. Can you imagine that? A Torah scroll written in Greek, not in Hebrew?
It's kosher.
And it's kosher. And some people said, only Greek, not any other language. You can't write it in Ugaritic or in Egyptian hieroglyphics or anything, but only Greek. There is a certain closeness between the Greek tradition and the Jewish tradition. Of course, it all turned sour when the Syrian Greeks took over, and they were a lot more heavy-handed. Basically, tried to wipe out the Jewish culture. And the Antiochus and his prohibitions, religious persecution, because he saw that the Jews were not giving in, but they tried to Hellenize us, and they're quite successful. Sometimes the worst attack, even worse than the guns, and the frontal opposition, is the silent killer. We talked about it. Slowly overtaking, trying to convince the Jews to come and leave. It's a great movie. Maybe I'll show it to you next week on Hanukkah, in preparation for Hanukkah. I think it's on YouTube even. It's a cute little movie about the Jews who were becoming Hellenists and how the Hanukkah miracle, how they were not willing to let go of their Jewish identity. It's a children's movie, first animated movies from like 30 years ago. First animated Jewish movie, but it's sweet. It's a sweet movie. It's called Orot, Lights. It's kind of old-fashioned, but I'll show it to you. B'ezrat Hashem. Or at least I'll send you the link. I don't know if we have to watch it here, but you can watch it at home. There's going to be a 3-day break, you know that, for you to learn Torah on your own, and to visit, have some a breather mid semester. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not the coming week, but the week of Hanukkah is going to be off, and this coming week is going to be, there's a tiyul volunteering day on the coming Tuesday. So we won't have regular classes. Well, the information will come later with the details. In any case, so we have some special events coming up. Back to the Greeks. In the period of the pairs, that's when things started to get worse, and we have the Hanukkah miracle. Okay, so we've been focusing on period 3, and then we said that really is what we're celebrating is that the Jewish revival, if you will, the Jewish independence claimed by the Maccabees, brought to fore the leadership of the sages, allowed the leadership of the sages, which took us into the period of the sages, period number 4. These numbers, of course, are rough, 0 to 500. Every period is 500 years, just for us to keep it straight in our heads. But the precision here is not our goal, historical precision. We know that the temple was destroyed in year 70. But when we do talk about the period of the Tanaim, usually we say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the first of the Tanaim. But that's already during the Romans, as you can see at the top of period 4, the Roman Empire overtook the Greek Empire. And the Hasmonean leaders had to deal with this Roman Empire. Ultimately, there was infighting amongst the Jews, and they even invited the Romans to come in to try to solve the political infighting between this group of Jews and that group of Jews. And once you invite them in, they said, we're not leaving. And we were under Roman rule for the next hundreds of years. Many hundreds of years, yes.
This is a scenario where there's like no rulings in the Jewish people, and then they invited Roman to check who's going to rule, and the Roman says, no, I'm going to rule you instead.
Yeah, it's not so much that there was no rule. There was the Hasmonean rule, but there was fighting between the Jews, and this group of Jews wanted their leader, and another group of Jews wanted their leader, and one of them came up with a great idea. Let's call in Uncle Sam. Excuse me, just trying to make it a little bit relevant. And maybe he will help us. Turns out once you call Uncle Sam, he's going to tell you what to do, and ended up destroying the temple, and that was the end of the independence for any semblance of independence for a long time since. Anyways, we were really discussing the content of in terms of the Torah, in terms of the spiritual development that the oral law and the oral teachings got written down and developed during this period of the sages. That's what we've been focusing on. Good morning.
Hey.
I remember you.
Wow.
Welcome back. Still in Tel Aviv, or what's the story? Yeah. But you're here for a day? Are you going to come?
Yeah, I came for the day.
Wonderful. Great. Have a seat. So we have a chart for Amikam, isn't it? Amikam, right? Amikam, right. Here's one. This one. We're looking at our Jewish history. And it's a special lesson today. I want to discuss a little bit further with you. So we've been focusing on the period of the sages. Yesterday we spoke about the Tanaim and the Moraim. And if you look at the books at the bottom of period 4, the books, the Jewish literature which was produced, you can see we spoke about the Midrash yesterday as well as the Talmud. Difference is the organization structure is, of course, old or new. The old one was by the books of the Tanakh. The new one is these 6 categories innovated by Rabbi Yehuda, the prince. Okay, this is what we covered yesterday. See that at the bottom, number 4? The Midrash. Who can tell me what the Midrash is? It's sort of like the Talmud. I wouldn't say it's the Talmud. It has less discussions than the Talmud. In other words, it's not exactly the same thing as the Talmud. It's the same thing because it's the same rabbis. It's the same rabbis. I have more if you need. Yeah.
It's 300 AD or 400 AD.
From 0 to 500.
The first guy.
We're on 0 to 500. What do you have about 300?
And Midrash, the first commentator, what's the name of the person who pioneered
So Midrash appears throughout this period. Yesterday we mentioned that a forerunner of the Midrash was Megillat. What did I say? Masechet Sofrim, Megillat Ta'anit. There are some external books which are not part of the Talmud, but they are from the rabbis of that period. But pretty much the Midrash is a collection of statements, of teachings from Tanaim and Amoraim. Sometimes they're mixed up. Whereas you have teachings of Tanaim quoted, but the book was only put together during the Amoraic period, or even later. Sometimes even the book of Midrash was put together in the next period, but the people being quoted are Amoraim and Tanaim. So it doesn't matter when the actual book was finalized. What matters is the words are the words of the sages. The sages, Chachamenu, Zichronam Nivracha, the golden era of Judaism. Okay? I want to move ahead with you now, briefly, and cover the next 1,500 years in 5 minutes. Are you ready? Are you ready? Period number 5. What's it called? Geonim. Why do they call them the Geonim? No. That's exactly what I wanted to prove to you. You fell for it. Thank you so much. I knew you knew. I think you know the right answer. In modern Hebrew, Gaon means genius. Sometimes people call me a Gaon. Right? But that's a modern usage. In Jewish history, the Geonim were actually, it was a title. It was like chief rabbi. The Gaon was the chief rabbi, and it was a title passed from one person for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and then he died, and then there was a new Gaon, and then there was a new Gaon. That's why the whole period is called the period of the Gaonim. I have a list here somewhere. I don't know where it is now. We have the names of these rabbis who are the Gaonim. I called them here Babylonian rabbis. Okay, those are the Jewish leadership, the Geonim. There's some famous ones. You might have heard of Rabbi Saadia Gaon. He wrote the first major work of Jewish philosophy called Emunot V'Deot, Faiths and Beliefs. And there's Rav Hai Gaon. There's Rav Achai Gaon. We have books from the Geonim. What were they doing? So the primary thing, what happened was as follows, is that the Talmud was sealed at around 500, 600, right at the end of the period of Chazal. And an amazing phenomenon happened. The book of the Talmud was sent to Jewish communities around the world. First of all, Jewish communities started to crop up around the world. The Roman Empire pretty much spread, and the Jews had to leave the land of Israel already in the year 400. There was no more Jerusalem Talmud being written. The Amoraim they were being persecuted in Israel, and so the Jews started to spread. Of course, the major center became Babylon, and that's why we have the leadership of the Babylonian rabbis. But there were Jews everywhere. The Jews, were to North Africa, and to Italy, to various communities around the Mediterranean basin, as it's called. And there, the Jews wanted to live their Judaism. What did they do? They said, let's take the Talmud. The Talmud is going to be the basis of our restatement of Judaism. Of course, so now we have two books. We have the Tanakh and the Talmud. But the problem was, and this is really the miraculous thing, that what keeps the Jewish people together until today is that we follow the Talmud. That is the foundational book. There's all sorts of Jewish streams today, in the last few hundred years, that have cropped up. Pretty much they're short-lived because they don't follow the Talmud. They don't accept the rulings of the Talmud as binding. And that's the foundation of Judaism as we live it, is the Talmud is accepted all around. But there started to become a problem, and that is that the Talmud is full of discussions, and it's quite complicated. You have to be quite a scholar. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what the bottom line is. It's not a cut and dry book of do this, don't do that. And so what did the Jewish communities around the world? They needed solution. They needed guidance. Who did they send letters to? The Babylonian rabbis. What are they called? The Geonim. The Geonim. Okay, the plural is Geonim, the singular, Gaon. It's just a grammatical thing. So, and the Geonim wrote their letters back. It says in the Talmud, in this place like this, in that place like that. Bottom line is, we learned a little bit of the, follow the majority, but sometimes it's not a clear majority. Sometimes there's other considerations. How should we practice Talmudic Judaism? And the leadership came from Bavel, from the Babylonian rabbis, from the Geonim. And not only that, in the beginning of the period, from year 500 to 600, you see there's another name there in period number 5 of the leadership. There's a group called Savoraim. Savara means reasoning, but really, primarily, their job was to edit the Talmud. The Talmud was really improved as a book that can be studied, that can be used by this editing of the Savoraim. But so they had a very important role in making sure that the Talmud, and they only worked on the Babylonian Talmud, the Talmud Bavli. It's the book that you see here, Talmud Bavli. The Palestinian, I'm calling it the Palestinian Talmud, the Talmud, otherwise known as the Jerusalem Talmud. It was the Talmud from the land of Israel. It didn't have that editing, and it didn't get the widespread popularity that the Babylonian Talmud did. And so they're both authoritative, but more the Babylonian than the Jerusalem Talmud. In any case, so this is what was going on, is that from now on, if you want to know what Judaism has to say about artificial intelligence, or if you wanted to know what Judaism has to say about coal mining, or anything that gets developed or if you wanted to know what Judaism has to do about redeeming captives, where are you going to look? So you can look in some stories in the Bible about David went to release the captives. They took his family captives, right? Achish Melech Gat. He fought against them and they took his families hostage. And Abraham, right, fought the 4 kings to go get Lot. And then there are stories, that's the first place you can look, but then in the Talmud, there's many stories about Reish Lakish. He went to save, I think his name was Rabbi Abba, who was captured by bandits. And we study exactly how he did that and what was said about it. And the Talmud has many statements about redeeming captives. There's a lot of, Talmud is 3,000 pages. Tanakh is about 1,000 pages. But it's very dense. Both of them are very dense. In any case, the Jewish tradition about what we believe even about philosophy. Where did Rabbi Sadia Gaon get the information for his book of philosophy? From the Talmud and from the Tanakh, the 2 major books. Okay? So then, and this is an amazing thing, that everybody around the world, all the Jewish people accepted the Talmud as the word of Judaism. Until today. For every topic under the sun, whether it's halacha or agadah, we look into these 2 major books and see, well, what did our sages say about this? Okay, this is the first period, is the Gaonic period. Primarily what they wrote were letters. letters are called, if you look at the bottom, there's 3 bullets. You look at the bottom right-hand box on your chart, where it says secondary literature. It's called secondary because what's primary? What's the primary literature? This is secondary literature. What's the primary literature? Give me more. Give me the right answer. What is the primary literature of Judaism? Tanakh and Talmud. 2 primary books. Tanakh and Talmud. That's why they're darkened out. The first 2 boxes on the bottom there. Everything after that, for the last 1,500 years, you could call it secondary literature. It's based on the Tanakh and the Talmud. And the Midrash too, okay? I'm not leaving out that the main thing is that it comes from the period of the sages. And then the secondary literature consists of 3 or 4 different types of books. The third one, in the third bullet, is called responsa. In Hebrew, she'elot utshuvot. Acronym, SHUT. Shin Vav Taf. She'elot utshuvot. First letter of Shin, and then Vav, and Taf. It's for Teshuvah. What's Teshuvah? It's an answer. She'elah, question. As I was describing to you, the Gaonim were bombarded with questions from Jewish people from around the world. Please explain to me, based on the primary literature, the Torah and the Talmud, based on this, how should we practice? Or even when it comes to questions of belief. And to tell you the truth, this system of interpreting the Torah in letters, back and forth, people asking rabbis and answering them, it continues until today. It didn't stop when the Gaonic period ended. The next period is called the period of the, look at number 6, Rishonim, famously the Rambam. Was it during the period of the Rishonim? Some people call that the Middle Ages. Right? 1204 is, I think, when the Rambam died. Am I correct?
11 something.
He died in 1204, I think. Something like that. But that's around when the Rambam lived. The Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Maimon, and he has letters that were written to him about questions of philosophy, also about questions of halakha. You know who really, really wrote letters? Which community, in which country wrote letters to Maimonides, is another name for the Rambam. And they asked him for guidance. He lived in Egypt at the end of his life, and so they didn't really have to write him letters so much. But which community? Which country wrote letters to Maimonides and asked him for guidance in philosophy, in beliefs, in public leadership, and in halakha?
In French?
No.
France?
No. You know the answer. You're going to kick yourselves when I tell you the answer.
Israel?
No.
Babylon?
No.
Spain?
Nope. Whew. Got you guys.
Yemen.
Yes.
Oh.
Ah. And because of that, until today, 800 years later, Yemenites still follow the words of the Rambam, more so than any other community, because he was their leader, and he wrote them letters. We have the letters that he wrote to them and the questions that they asked him. But this system of writing letters continues until today. There are halachak, for example, we were discussing the laws of Shabbat not too long ago, and we talked about microwaves. We said, what's the rule of microwaves? Is that cooking? When you cook up an egg in a microwave, are you guilty of violating biblical law? Obviously, let's say you would put it on a timer, okay? You don't have to use electricity. But you're cooking, but there's no fire. Part of the definitions of cooking used to be with fire. Along came, somebody asked a great rabbi, just 50 years ago. Asked them, what's the deal? It's a new type of cooking called microwave. Do you violate the prohibition of cooking on Shabbat? So the famous rabbi that was asked was Rav Moshe Feinstein, lived in New York in the same building as my in-laws, on the Lower East Side. And he was an amazing scholar. He came originally from Russia, but he came to America. And this is what he did. Most of the day, he sat and wrote letters, answers to questions which were being sent to him. And he wrote a letter about, the topic is, Bishul be-microwave. He didn't use the modern Hebrew mikrogal. Gal is a wave. And he discusses it based on the sources in the Talmud. Is it considered to be biblical? And he comes up with a novel interpretation. He says it's prohibited biblically, even though there's no fire. Not everybody agreed with him. There's other rabbis who also wrote answers to this type of question. This is this is a type of Jewish literature. From the time of the Talmud, when it was closed, until today. Questions and answers I get mostly daily. Sometimes it's a little bit once a week. I get questions. What's up? From students, from former students. It's a form of a responsa, is it not? Sheilot utshuvot. What does it matter what the medium is, whether it's WhatsApp or snail mail, what we call it? That's it. That's another type of Jewish literature. That's it. And yeah, we're in period 8, exactly. In period 8. So that happens until today. People are asking questions of rabbis all the time, and they have to respond. Sometimes they're old questions. That's just lack of knowledge. That's explicitly written in the Talmud. You just didn't get around to studying it enough. Or that's explicitly in another book of Jewish literature, which we're going to discuss now. What other types of Jewish literature? But before that, I just want to show, I used the term Rishonim. You see that period 6 and period 7? It's very curious about Jewish scholarship that somehow there was a dividing line between these two periods, Rishonim and Achronim. The words of the earlier scholars have more weight than the words of the later scholars. Somehow, some historians or some Jewish scholars claim there must have been some gathering of all the Jews, maybe in Europe, maybe, I don't know where they were, but they got together and they said, well, we no longer are on the level of Rambam and Rashi and those Rishonim, the earlier scholars. And after year 1500, we don't have the right to go head to head against the Rishonim. I'm an Achron, right? Or the chief rabbi is an Achron today. He can't say, I think the Rambam was wrong on that. He has to find another Rishon, the Ramban, who disagrees with the Rambam, to say we should follow one of them. Then you can debate which one we should follow today. We could discuss it as a majority, minority. There's unique circumstances which changed. But pretty much, after year 1500, it became accepted by all rabbis everywhere around the world that we are no longer on the same level as the Rishonim. And we can't go head to head against them and say they were wrong. We think we're right and they were wrong. We have to interpret them. Very similar, what was I telling you yesterday? When did this happen? That there was like a line drawn in the sand where the rabbi said, we're no longer going to argue against those earlier rabbis. When did that happen? We discussed it yesterday. Excellent. Tanaim and Amoraim. You see that in the middle of section 4? In my edition that I'm looking at, I have A and B. Do you have A and B? Or some of you have a line in between Tanaim and Amoraim. So there's a similar line drawn in the sand between the period of the Rishonim and the Achronim. Okay? So this is pretty much, you got it there, the 7 periods. If you could do them off by heart, you know when their years also. Look at the periods, the first the two rows. Okay? The names of the periods and the years. That should be ingrained in your mind for understanding the Torah, for understanding our Jewish tradition. 0 to 500 is Chazal, 500 to 1,000 is the Geonim, 1,000 to 1,500 Rishonim, and 1,500 until today, essentially, is the Acharonim, the period of the later scholars. Okay, now throughout the last three periods, it's all called secondary literature, right? If you look at the bottom again, the bottom right-hand box is what I want to explain to you now. The different types of Torah books we have after the Talmud was sealed. But all this literature is based on the two primary works of Judaism. What are they? Tanakh and Talmud. Okay, you getting it? You get it? It's a big divide. I should really make big black lines between these periods, but I'm doing my best with my graphic skills, with word table. So let's look at the bottom right-hand side. We talked about responsa. That's a type of literature. This was written throughout the different ages. We have responsa from Achronim, responsa from Rishonim, and responsa from Geonim. Another type of literature is commentaries. Of course, commentaries on what? Commentaries on Tanakh. And commentaries on the Talmud. Right? Those are the two works of primary literature. So we have commentaries on the Tanakh and we have commentaries on the Talmud. In each and every era, primarily the Rishonim, that's why they're called the early ones, because the first works of commentary, a running commentary on each and every page of the Talmud, as well as each and every page of the Tanakh, we really start to find it at the beginning of year 1000.
And the word parsha, is that Yiddish or is that Hebrew? Mefarshim, is that a...
That's Hebrew. Hebrew. Lefaresh is to interpret.
Oh, Mefarish.
You can see there's three versions of the same word there. Perushim and Mefarshim and Parshanim. Usually, Perushim means commentaries. And then the reason why it's almost like unwritten rule, Parshanim are on the Tanakh and Mefarshim are on the Talmud. So it's not written on your page. If you want to write it in, you can. Parshanim is what we use for the commentaries on the Tanakh. What's a famous commentary on the Chumash that you know? Rashi. Everybody knows Rashi. One of the first running commentaries on the entire Torah. And the Tanakh is by Rashi. He became known as the commentary, the Parshan, singular, the commentator on the Tanakh. But what Mefarshim do we have on the Talmud? Rashi. Also Rashi. He wrote a running commentary on the entire Talmud as well. Almost the entire Talmud. In some places it says, in the middle of Masechet Ta'anit, if I'm not mistaken, it says, here Rashi died. Sad. The Talmud is written, every page of Talmud is written like this. It looks like this. Let me show you. Could open up to any page. This is the Talmud, the big black letter, bold black square letters in the middle. And then on the inside margin is the commentary of Rashi. On the outside margin, other Mefarshim. This one is famously known as a Tosfot. They were students of Rashi, grandchildren of Rashi. It's a collected work of a few scholars from France and Germany in the 13th century, even into the 14th century. On this page, you've got literature.
How do you read it?
Yeah, you have to learn how to read it. Yeah, you read, So you read the central text from top to bottom, And then every time there's a hard word or a concept that you need explanation for, you can look commentary in Rashi. He says, this is my comment on this word or this concept. Or other commentaries. Also, you can see it's divided. This is more paragraphs, and they have deeper discussions of what Rashi said, of what the Talmud said. The Talmud, when is this from, the Talmud, the core text? Chazal. Was sealed in the year 600. And then we have Rashi's commentaries from year 1100. And the Tosfot from the 12th and the 13th century, 14th century. Wow! And then in the margin is actually other commentaries. For example, here it says Hagahot HaGra. Who's the Gra? Anybody know who the Gra was? It's an acronym for Gaon Rabbi Eliyahu. This is confusing though. He was not from the Gaonim. He was actually called a genius because he was a genius. It's a misnomer. But he lived in the 1800s. 1800s! Wait, we just jumped from the 14th century to the 19th century. On the same page, we have over 1,000 years of scholarship. It's unbelievable. I don't know of any other text like it. When you study Gemara, you also study a commentary from 100 years later, and then a commentary from 100 years later, and commentary from a few hundred years later, until some Gemaras actually have notes from current rabbis. Until today. 1,000 years of scholarship on one page. It's an amazing thing. The Talmud is that's why we call the Talmud the primary literature. Everything afterwards is secondary. Anyways, why am I showing this? Rashi has a running commentary on the entire Talmud like he has a commentary on the entire Tanakh. And in the middle of Masechet Ta'anit, it says here, there's a break in the paragraph. There's a paragraph break and it says, here Rashi died. Tradition is that there's a commentary in the next paragraph. Who wrote the next paragraph? So there's a tradition that his daughters wrote the rest of the commentary on that Masechet. There's other sections of the Talmud where we don't have Rashi's commentary. We have his grandson, Rashbam, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir was his grandson. Rashi only had daughters, but they had sons. Yeah, so Rashi's grandsons were great Talmudic scholars as well. And the Rashbam, he's the famous commentary on Masechet Baba Batra, for example. We don't have Rashi on Baba Batra. Or we do have Rashi, but we also, on the same page, you'll have the commentary of his grandson. And that Rashbam also wrote a Perush on the Chumash. In some Chumashim, you have Perush Rashi and Perush Rashbam. The story is told that the Rashbam came to his Zaidi, to his grandfather, and studied Torah with him. And he asked him, Rashi, why did you write this commentary here? Why did you write that commentary there? I have a different opinion, says the grandson. And this is why I think I'm right. And apparently Rashi said to him, you're absolutely right. If we had the ability, we could write an entire new commentary on the Torah with different interpretations, with different approaches. Well, famously, we talk about 70 faces of the Torah. There's so many, the primary sources can be interpreted in many different ways. And that's what the Jewish people have been doing for 1,500 years. Since the Talmud was sealed, we've been interpreting. Commentaries have been written. Yes, a question?
Rashbam is a Rabbeinu Tam?
No. He lived at the same time approximately. Rabbeinu Tam, his name was Rabbi Yaakov. He's from a place, I don't know why it was called Tam. It was like a family name. I don't know how he got it. But he was a very central figure about 150 years after Rashi. And he was the leadership of French Jewry. And he was a very innovative halachist. We have a book that he wrote called Sefer HaYireim. We also have his comments in the Tosfot, mentioned in that collection of commentaries. Yeah, he was an amazing figure, Rabbeinu Tam. There was a lot of amazing figures in this period of 500 years, the period of the Rishonim. Unbelievable.
Who wrote this Shulchan Aruch?
So let's move ahead. We did bullet number 1 and bullet number 3. What's bullet number 2? Bullet number 2 is another genre of Jewish literature. It's called, as you can see, codes. Codes of law. And here we really find for the first time something that Rav Kook was not happy with, right? We talked about it yesterday. The division between halacha and agadah. In the Talmud, in the Midrash, they're mixed. Jewish tradition was always a blend of philosophy and law and ritual and history. It's always together, like the book that we've been learning, Pnei Halacha, right? Tries to bring it together. But for almost 1,000 years, another genre of literature cropped up, which I think it came from the ground up. They said, this Talmud is wonderful, but I need a practical guide. How to get married, how to get divorced, what the law is when this happens, what the law is when that happens. The philosophy leave for another time. Now I need to know how to practice. And so these books of rules, these rule books, started to get written. They're called Sifrei Halacha or Psak. What does the word Psak mean?
Decision.
No. Psak. Ifsok means to cut, to decide. That's why a word translation. No, that's with a different letter, chet at the end. This is with a kuf at the end.
Conclusion?
It's to lifsok really means to interrupt. It's sort of like when you bottom line. What's the bottom line of the sugya? So you cut the discussion and you set the halacha. So we use the word poskim for decisors, people who decide what the halacha is. So there are many different books. Pesach is a decision, a cutting. That's right. Yeah. Cutting the debate and finalizing the bottom line, what the rule is, the rulings are. So Psak Halacha is halachic rulings or decisions, decisors. You could call them rulers, but then you'd think that's something you smack on, the teacher smacks you with, right? With the ruler.
Sounds like Parliament.
Yeah, well, it's true, but here it's more bottom line what comes out of Parliament. What comes out of the court of law is a rule book, right? What the rules are. So we have some famous ones. You might have heard of the Rambam wrote a famous book of halacha called I had students from China, from Kaifeng. I taught them for conversion. They came from a line of Jews who were lost, but we don't know exactly the lineage, even though they had a tradition. They're from their family. So they came to Israel, and they wanted to rejoin the Jewish people. And I took them to the Beit Din, prepared them for conversion. And at the conversion court, sometimes the rabbis will ask you a few questions, just to see if you know what it means to be a Jew, how to practice as a Jew. Sometimes they ask you a halacha. Sometimes they ask you, do you believe in a different God? Simple questions usually. But this one, because they'd been studying with me for many years, there was a lot of bureaucracy involved. So he decided to ask a high-level question, the judge, the rabbinical judge. He asked my student from China, he asked him, what book did the Rambam write? Yes, tough question. What book did the Rambam write? And he wrote a few books. We learned about it. The most famous one is Yad HaChazakah. That's the Yud Dalet is 14. The 14 books of Yad HaChazakah. That's, in other words, another term for that is called Mishneh Torah. It's up there. See that blue series? And the yellow one next to it is another version. Both of them are the major magnum opus of Maimonides, who wrote a rule book, basically. It's mostly halacha about how to practice Judaism based on what? Tanakh and Talmud. Good. He's picking up He's picking it up. Tanakh and Talmud, basically. And the commentaries on the Talmud up until his day, till the 12th century.
So Maimonides is Rambam.
Maimonides is Rambam, same guy. Yeah. It's an acronym. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. The blue set and the yellow set next to it.
This is 14 books?
14 books, yeah.
Blue color.
It's also 14 books, yeah. They made it in less volumes. They have two books in one volume just to make it cheaper. It's in 8 volumes, but it's 14 books. The other one is actually 14 thinner books. It's a beautiful set. Both of them are beautiful sets, really modern. Just published the last 10 years.
And that's written by.
This is by Maimonides, yeah. And what's special about them, each one has a short commentary. Commentary on the Rambam. So this is, you could say, not secondary literature, but what would you call it? Tertiary literature. There's commentary on the commentary, right? Actually, it's not on the commentary, it's on the code. The code was written by Maimonides. And the commentaries are modern commentaries. The one on the blue one was written by Rabbi Steinsaltz. You might have heard of him.
These are 14 subjects, right?
Correct. Exactly. 14 different subjects. Who previously had divided up Jewish tradition into subjects? Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, right? He said 6 orders, 6 categories of topics of Jewish tradition. That's what made the Rambam so innovative, is he came up with a new division, a new system of categories. He based himself on the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, but he subdivided it a little bit, right? Instead of having 6 categories, he's got 14. So some he divided into 2, like if Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had Seder Nashim, the Rambam has 2 books. One Hilchot Ishut, or Seder Kedusha, Sefer HaKedusha. Another one is Sefer Nashim. One of them is called the same name, and one gets another name, Hilchot Kedusha. So he puts some of the laws here and some of the laws there. So he divides it a little differently than Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. But it's an amazing job. Basically, if you want what the Rambam tried to do is to summarize all of the Talmud, which is the discussions on the Mishnah and the way it was interpreted by the Gaonim for another 500 years, and by the Rishonim, which lived before him. There were others, I'm not going to discuss them now, and put it into one book. It was an amazing feat. And that's why we study it until today, and we write commentaries on it until today. So there's commentaries on the commentaries, you understand? There's commentary on the codes written. Another famous code of law, not written in the 13th century or 12th century, but written in the 16th century, is very famous. Which one, Stephen? Shulchan Aruch. You see it there? Now the Shulchan Aruch, I have a wonderful page to show you this. I wonder if I have enough copies here for everybody. The Shulchan Aruch was based on a previous book. Rabbi Yosef Karo, here, this is the beautiful chart. I have. Yeah, sure, I have an extra copy. Sure, here you go. Anybody else want one? This is a list of the books of the Talmud. Here's a chart. Yosef, could you ask Rav Listman to make 9 copies of it for us, please? Thank you so much. Sure, of course. Sure, add it to your collection. Frame it. So, I'm talking about the Shulchan. Boker Tov. I was just sending you a photocopy job. Yeah, Amikam is here. It's unbelievable. Baruch Hashem. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. So you have a building Oh, you have it already? Okay, great. You have a building. Ah, here's a house. The house needs foundations. So you're going to make a foundation in the corner of, make it 3D. You have to have 4 columns that hold up the house. It's a platform, right? So there was a fellow called, his name was Yaakov. Yaakov, the son of Asher, Rabbeinu Asher, he was the chief rabbi of Spain. And he said, it's time for a new halachic code. With all due respect to Maimonides, who originally lived in Spain also, but it's been 300 years, and a lot of what the Rambam wrote about is not applicable anymore. There's no more temple. There's no more sacrifices. Maimonides wrote about everything, like Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi with the 6 orders, divided into 14, but he covered everything. He wanted to have a restatement of the entire Torah. Rabbi Yaakov in Spain said, we need a more practical guide for how we practice here in Spain. Also, it's not the same as it was 300 years ago. So he wrote a new book, and he called it The 4 Columns. And he divided up Judaism, practical Judaism, into 4 topics. I actually have a list, but it's only in Hebrew. So I'll just tell it to you. I'll put it on the board. The 4 columns are Orach Chaim. It's actually in the page. It's in the page that you're going to get in a minute. So I don't have to write it down. The 4 columns are Orach Chaim, which is day-to-day laws, including laws of the festivals, laws of prayers, laws of tefillin, tzitzit, practical Judaism. It's another section of practical Judaism is called Yoreh De'ah. Yoreh De'ah is ritual law. The laws of kashrut. The laws of forbidden mixtures. You're not allowed to wear wool and linen together. The laws of avelut are in there as well. A lot of ritual law. The laws of nidah are in Yoreh De'ah. The family purity laws. That's ritual law. That's another column. Then there's a 3rd column called Even HaEzer about marriage and divorce. All the laws of women. That's still practical. We don't have a temple, but we have women, don't we? Thank you, sir. And then Shabbat, which is about civil law, about criminal law and civil law. And
Copies of that.
oh, they're bad. Blacked out. Too dark.
Redacted. The redacted.
Ooh, could you ask Rav Listman to make it lighter? Try again and make it lighter?
I think when he told me that there's a little bit of problem in the printer, but
Okay, so you'll write it in. It'll better. It'll help you. I'll help you write it in. You'll write next to the box what it says. I have the original here. Actually, the original. You can get it from the internet as well in color. I have the original in color.
take a picture.
It's coming around. The copies are coming around.
Very good.
Oh, you have one. You have one here. I want to keep this so I can photocopy it better next time. But for now, I just want to show you the chart.
For me?
Yes.
I'm glad.
I'll get you a better copy in a minute. You know what? I'm going to go upstairs and make a better copy for
I
everybody.
take a copy in the other side.
I'm going to go upstairs and make a lighter copy.
Can you go up?
In color, you can, sorry. You can go upstairs to the room, and then you can choose to make it lighter. Do you know how to do that?
No.
So let me do that. In the meantime, everybody open up your Siddur, page 231, and pray for our captives, okay? For our soldiers, for our people in distress. Sing Achenu. Okay, Amikam doesn't know it yet. It's been here. If you guys don't teach him the song, I'll be right back, okay?
$231. אחד, שתיים, שלוש. אחינו Israel, Acheinu, Kodesh Israel, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו חוגג ישראל, אחינו חוגג ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם, יוציאם מצרה לרווחה ומעפר לעולם, ומשיבו לגאולה השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב. המקום ירחם עליהם, יוציאם מצרה לרווחה ומעפר לעולם, ומשיבו לגאולה השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב. Menachem, what's happened wrong? I never seen you like for a month.
Yeah, I'm supposed to move here, right? So I'm
Yeah.
planning to move here.
Ah, you're preparing to move here.
Yeah, because I have a lease.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
done.
yeah.
But I tried to get somebody to take over my lease, and I think because of the war, nobody wants to take it.
You're in yeshiva?
Here or maybe beside somewhere here or close.
I think it's cheaper to be here.
Yeah.
Better. Yeah. I mean, there's food, there's free food, like sorts of.
Hopefully these are better. Start having these around here.
This
It's a
is
little bit tricky because there's different shades.
this is from the printer outside, bro.
It's from upstairs. Upstairs, yeah. I just did a. See if these are readable.
Yeah,
More readable. Everybody got one? Okay. So you can see we start with the first major work of Judaism, the Chumash. What does Pentateuch mean? Penta? Five. Tuch is probably from teaching, I guess. We call it the Chumash, right? Pentateuch. There's other copies here if anybody needs. Everybody got one?
Is it the right pronunciation?
Yeah, that's the way we pronounce it in English. It's hard to read what they are, but you guys know the names of the books of the Chumash. Then the prophets and the writings, some details here. But then we have the period of Chazal. You can see I put it in a box. You see the box I drew? Because that's really understanding that the Mishnah and the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Gemara, that's the next major development in Jewish literature. Yesterday I described to you that there's Braitot. What's a Braita? External. It's words of the Chazal, but it's not in the Mishnah. Right? The Tosefta is a collection of Braitot. And we have finally the Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi, which is like the discussions of the sages about the Mishnah. And Midrash too. Midrash you can see is also there on your chart. You see Midrash and the period in the box? Midrash and Talmud, they're in the same period. Next, if you look beneath that box, can you read it? Works? and Responsa of Rabbanan Savorae. It's on your charts. I talked about the Savoraim as well.
Yeah, I put it on the phone.
Oh, you took a copy on the phone, and then you can make it larger.
No, I put the original one. That one.
You put this on in the group? So you can look in the WhatsApp group, and then you can go like this. Perfect. So Rabbanan Savorae, and then you have after that the works and responsa of the Geonim. Then we have works of Rishonim. In this edition, if you look up here, they're in different colors. It's nice. Rishonim are in blue here. Alphas, he was from Fez. He wrote a book of Halacha before the Rambam. And then after the Rambam, there was another book, a commentator in Spain, the Rosh, his name was Rabbeinu Asher. But that was not on your chart. What is on your chart is the Turim. The Turim. This is what I'm starting to explain to you here. That Rabbi Yaakov, in about year 1400, 1450, he wrote a new halacha book, and he came up with a new system of dividing Judaism, not into 6, and not into 14, into only 4. He cut back a lot of the stuff which is not practical, the temple, the purity laws which don't apply, and he just said 4 topics of practical Judaism. You can see them on your page. Orach Chaim, Yeridea, Even Ezer, and Choshen Mishpat. If you can read that names, those are Hebrew names, but you can see that in the box that says Turim. Tur is a column. He named his book the 4 columns. And then, most curiously, there was another rabbi whose name was Yosef, not Yaakov. His name was Yosef. Yosef Karo. He lived in the land of Israel. And he decided we need a new halacha book as well. But then he said to him, wait, someone showed me. There's this book of the 4 columns. I don't need to write a whole new book. I'll just write a commentary commentaries. We said that's what we keep having throughout the last 1500 years. I'm going to write a commentary not on the Talmud, not on the Rambam. I'm going to write a commentary on the Tur. It's colloquially known as the column, or the 4 columns. And Rav Yosef wrote a book called Beit Yosef as a commentary on the Tur. And then, he was such a great scholar. He was the chief rabbi of Israel, essentially. He was the greatest rabbi in Israel. And it became very popular, his commentary, because he added stuff because what they did in Spain. By the way, there was a few rabbis. Another one, I want to mention not only Yosef, there was another rabbi at the time who lived in Germany. And actually in Poland. And he said, in Europe, we practice Judaism a little differently. By the way, did you sing Achenu?
Yeah.
Yeah? Great, thanks. We practice, there's different customs in Europe. And so he was also going to write a halacha book. But then someone showed him, there's the 4 columns by Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Asher. You don't need to write your own book. So he said, okay, I won't write my book. I'll write a commentary on the Tur. So the Tur nowadays is usually published with the commentaries of Yosef and his name, the Ramah, is Rav Moshe Isserlis. I'll do it on the board here. We have Rabbi Yaakov, who did the 4 columns. And then 2 commentaries, one by Moshe, not the same Moshe as the Rambam, a different one. Isserlis, funny name. And he was from Krakow. His grave is still there in the old cemetery of Krakow, 500 years later, today. And the shul which he davened in. You can go and visit it in Krakow, in Poland, until today. And Yosef, we call him Yosef Karo, he actually, maybe he was from Cairo, I'm not sure. Maybe his father was from there, but he spent most of his life in Israel. He was the chief rabbi of Israel. They both wrote commentary on the 4 columns. Now, I was starting to say that Rabbi Yosef Karo became very popular. And his commentary was very central because he brought all the stuff that the Rabbi Yaakov had left out. And his students begged him, your commentary is very, very long. We have it in the other room, I just don't have it here. Your commentary is very, very long. Please write us a short form.
Oh, yeah, good.
Please write us a short form. A summary.
Thank
You could call it a little, an easier version of the 4 columns with your commentary on it. Because I can show you, the book's not here, but you have a very little bit of text, and then lots and lots and lots of commentary. So it's too big, it's too much, it's too complicated. We want a practical guide to Judaism. So he decided he's going to write his own book, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and he's going to call it the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, a set table, right? The table should be set. Shulchan Aruch.
The Aruch here is not meaning like long.
No, it's with an ayin. It means set. To set the table. A set table, just easy to eat from, right? It's hard to eat if you don't have the table set first. So he said, I'm going to give you an easy peasy guide to Jewish practice. And he basically but he decided, you know what? The 4 categories, there, Rabbi Yaakov did a good job. So basically he wrote a new version of the 4 columns. He kept the 4 divisions, the 4 books, and he kept chapter by chapter exactly the same. The chapter, if there's 10 chapters of the laws of Shabbat, in the Torah, there's 10 chapters about Shabbat. In the Shulchan Aruch, each chapter discusses exactly what the Torah discussed, but it has the opinions of Rabbi Yosef Karo instead of the opinions of Rabbi Yaakov. And then Rabbi Moshe Isserles said, hang on a second, what about all my comments on the Torah? So he decided, you know what? I'm going to put my comments. If this guy wrote, set the table, I'm going to put the mapa. What's a mapa? Not a map. Tablecloth. If he's the table, I'll be the tablecloth. And on every paragraph where the Polish, European, Ashkenazi practice is different from the Spanish or Eretz Yisrael practice, you have a comment, Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah. It's written together. Every version of the Shulchan Aruch now published has the text written. Okay, I'll write it. I'll write a halakha. Tefillin must be black. Okay, that's the law in the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, based on what he found in the Torah from Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher. You with me? Mm-hmm. And then, in the very same line, you'll have, in a different font, if they had colors, they would do different colors. But they didn't. So they use a different font. I'm going to try to do it black. And the comment of the Ramah, it says comment. And it's always Rabbi Moshe Isserles' comment. And he says, in these countries, sometimes he writes it, sometimes he doesn't, it's just obvious, only 1/7 side of the straps have to be black. Not both sides.
What's the oldest tefillin found in Talmud Bavli?
Oh, back to Second Temple times.
So BC.
Period of Chazal, even before that. Yeah, even before Chazal. Yeah.
So before Alexander the Great.
Around that time is when we find the earliest tefillin.
First.
Yeah, well, the problem is preservation because they really only found material goods like leather in the Dead Sea region because it was so dry, so it was able to not get worn out. So yeah, they found in the Dead Sea area tefillin from the times of approximately 300 BC, 150 BC for sure. I don't know about before that. Anyways, back to the Shulchan Aruch and the commentary of the Ramah. It's within the text. We have two texts together, Shulchan Aruch and the Mapah. This became the new standard halacha guide, halacha code. Until today, many people write commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch till today, and commentaries on the commentaries, and discussions needs to be updated. Okay? Yes, please.
No, Rama is a commentary.
Yeah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles. Rama. The aleph is pronounced Isserles, but in the acronym we say Rama, not Rami, for some reason. Rama. Yeah, because it's an aleph, not a yud, so it's Isserles. Rabbi Moshe Isserles is the Rama. So we have the Rabbi Yosef Karo and the Rama, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch and the tablecloth. Then take a look at the bottom of your page. You can see the chart after the Shulchan Aruch. It's the same 4 columns as in the Torah, the same divisions. And then the next level, in my color copy, it's yellow. These are, guess what these are? Commentaries on what? On the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries. See what's going on? This is not tertiary, but what's the next? Ooh, something, the 4th level of commentary. It's all, but the major division still is primary literature, Tanakh and Talmud. Everything since is going back to our chart. Go back to our chart. We have different types of literature. What's on our chart? Let's list the 4 types of literature there. Number 1 is commentaries. Number 2 is, see what I'm reading over here? Number 2 is law codes. Number 3 is shoot. Good. Espanza. 4th type is really what I wanted to talk about today. I'm getting into it now. We have 15 minutes left. But it's okay. It's okay. We have more time next week. That's it. Well, part of it. Additional books presenting Jewish traditions. Sometimes there's books about a topic. It's not a running commentary, and it's not a collection of laws, but it's a book about, let's say, redemption. So they're going to pull sources. Of course, from where? The Tanakh and the Talmud. But also, now if you're going to write a book now about Jewish tradition, about redemption, where are you going to pull from? Tanakh and Talmud is where you start. And then you're going to pull from the words of the Geonim, the words of the Rishonim, which you can find some of them in the Responsa, and some of them in the codes, and some of them in the commentaries. You see how it works? But the book is going to be about a topic. And some of the topics are halachic, and some of them are machshava, musar, kabbalah, beliefs, etc. Now, one more time, I want you to look at this chart that I just gave you now. Something very curious here about this chart. Look in the period of Chazal. There's a tiny little book there on the left-hand side, just underneath the Pentateuch, right opposite the Midrash. Zohar. It says the Zohar. The Zohar, according to this chart, makes a lot of sense. It's a type of midrash. It's a type of discussion of the Tanakh. The organizing principle, like any midrash, is books of the Tanakh. So we have a mystical, Zohar is a mystical tradition. We have a mystical commentary on the Torah. It's like a midrash. The reason why they put it here in this box is because our tradition tells us that the Zohar was written by Rabban Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a Tana, student of Rabbi Akiva, going back to the period of Chazal. So that's why they put it in this box, because it's the period of Chazal. Of course, modern scholarship has proven that not all of the Zohar that we have today was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's almost impossible to claim that every word of the Zohar was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai for a number of reasons. One is that people are mentioned who lived hundreds of years after Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Unless you want to claim that he was a prophet, he couldn't be talking about people that were hundreds of years after him. So it really only appeared, the Zohar appeared as a book in public in the 13th century, which takes us quite about 1,000 years after year 200. 200 to 1300, over 1,000 years. So the traditional explanation is that the core of the mystical teachings come from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the period of the sages, but the literary form in which it was made popular is a later development. It got written down later. Like we said about many midrashim, they quote the Tanaim and the Amoraim, but they were collected and put together as a book later. Same thing we could say about the Zohar. We're not going to get into the precise argument which rages in the halls of the academia and the Beit Midrash until today. Who wrote the Zohar, exactly when and how? That's not really our interest right now. The bottom line is that the Zohar is a representation of the mystical tradition of Judaism. And it seems quite clear. There's other books of Kabbalah which also appear to be ancient, earlier than the 13th century. And we have traditions that, for example, the earliest book of Kabbalah is probably Sefer HaYetzirah. It's attributed to Avraham Avinu. That goes back to minus 1300, 1500, another 1,000 years before that. So we're not sure exactly that every word in the book was from Avraham Avinu. Language changed, the way books were written changed. So much has changed over thousands of years. But the core idea is that the mystical traditions, as it says on the top of your chart, from Sinai. The Torah came from Sinai. The written Torah, the oral Torah, the mystical interpretation of the Torah, it's all part of our tradition, which was passed down. And sure, over the ages got developed by the sages as they were supposed to do. Take that wheat, turn it into beautiful, delicious bread, right? Take that flax and turn it into textiles, right? So there's a development of the oral tradition over the course of the years. Now, why did I want to talk about the mystical tradition of Judaism today? I'll tell you. Does anybody want to tell me?
Why are we talking about the mystical tradition today?
Yeah, specifically today.
It's part of Judaism.
Popularity?
It is part of Judaism, but why today?
Popular?
It's popular, yeah, it's becoming more popular nowadays. Sure, there's always an interest in mystical traditions when there's upheaval in the world and people are searching for meaning. Mystical traditions are very, but not specifically today.
Is it the answer to something?
On the 19th of Kislev, which comes out to be 2 days from now on Shabbat, it's the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. Who was the Baal Shem Tov? Baal Shem Tov, he took Kabbalah, the mystical traditions of Judaism, first found in the Zohar, as you find on your charts, later on developed by the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzchak lived in Tzfat, famously. He really developed the mystical tradition, wrote a commentary on the Zohar, and his own books as well. Really, his students wrote the books. He died very young, but his students wrote up his teachings. And here we are, the Baal Shem Tov lived approximately 1750.
In Shabbat.
250 years. No, the Baal Shem Tov was in Europe. The Ari was in Tzfat. Baal Shem Tov was, where did he live? In the Ukraine, yeah. In the Ukraine. And he had his own new twist on things. What he did, he was a major figure, very popular teacher of a very unique type. And it's his birthday. This Shabbat is his birthday, the Baal Shem Tov's birthday. And he taught basically Kabbalah, but he translated it into a new version of Kabbalah. If most of the mystical traditions spoke about the godly realm, angels, various levels of heaven, and how God works and how He runs the world, you might have heard of Sphirot and worlds and all sorts of metaphysical beings. The Baal Shem Tov said all that mystical tradition is true, but you know where it happens? Do you know where it happens? Not in the heavens with the angels. It's inside each and every one of us. There's 5 worlds. There's 5 levels of the metaphysics. There's 5 levels of the soul. And he basically translated a lot of the mystical teachings and made it, I wouldn't say psychology, call it spiritual psychology. He said, this is the way the human being is made up. And what does that mean for us, for our lives? And he founded a movement which is called Chassidut, not Chabad. Chabad is a student of his. A student of his, actually. The Maggid Mezrich was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, and he had famously a few students. One of them, the primary one, perhaps, was the founder of the Lubavitch movement. His name was the Alter Rebbe, and the reason why he is of prominence now is because it's primarily the Chabad Hasidim, the students of this, the elder Rabbi Schneur Zalman from Liadi, from White Russia. He had a run-in with the law. What? What was he? Drug running? What was he? Smuggling? What? He's a rabbi. He was a teacher. Wouldn't you know it? The Jews were fighting with each other, and they called in Uncle Sam. In that case, it was Uncle Lenin. No, it was before Lenin. It was the Tsar. They called in the Tsar. Said, this group of Jews, they're rebelling against the government, so you better put them in jail. And they did. They listened to him. They put him in jail. Very quickly, he showed them what they're dealing with, and there's amazing stories about how he dealt with the jailers. Bottom line is, he was released from jail, and the Lubavitch Hasidim of this Rebbe felt that this was the founding moment of Hasidut, in their version of Hasidut, their teachings of the Baal Shem Tov being taught by their master, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, basically got exonerated, and he was able to continue to teach and to spread his interpretation of Judaism to the entire world as we know it. And they made this day a day of celebration because of 2 things that happened on this day. One is the Baal Shem Tov was born, and the second is that the first Lubavitcher Rebbe was released from prison. Basically got exonerated from any, these false attempts that he was rebellious. They realized he was a religious leader. He was not a political leader trying to overthrow the Tsar. So This day is marked increasingly every year by Hasidim, and in recent years, Hasidut has become more and more popular. More and more popular. Hasidut, this interpretation of Judaism, of the mystical side of Judaism, and how we're supposed to live our lives based on it, is very popular until today. And after class today, at 2 o'clock, there's actually a festival to celebrate because Shabbat, you can't play musical instruments. There's a concert and a big fair of books of Hasidut just down the block in the Israel Convention Center. And I think I have 2 tickets still available. You want to go? Yeah, 35 shekels a ticket. So Michael, we might have 1 candidate over there, so I might have 1 ticket left. Is anybody interested other than Chanoch? Let me know. Shmuel's coming. And but anyways, it's part of this festival of Hasidut, essentially. It's celebrating this new way of teaching Judaism, essentially, which is very musical, very musical. Hasidic movement, very into using music in their worship of Hashem. And there's a book fair, meaning there's hundreds and hundreds of books written through the perspective of the Baal Shem Tov, through the perspective of his interpretation of Kabbalah. That's why I wanted to talk about a little bit here, the last words on your chart here. Really, it's part of a development of Judaism, but if the Zohar is from the period of Chazal, then it's part of the mystical tradition of Judaism, a very late addition to Judaism. The last movement, really, the last major movement which was founded was Hasidut. That's, of course, during which period? When did the Baal Shem Tov live? Which period? Acharonim, right? 1800. It's definitely 1750, definitely Acharonim, the last period. So it's amazing. We have new innovations. There's only one more major movement that I want to conclude with today that you might be familiar with, which was founded. There's Musar too, but I want to talk about even a later movement, which was founded as an interpretation, as a way to live Judaism today. Dati Leumi, this idea of religious Zionist sort of social group. It's turned into a social group. It's a type of interpretation of Judaism, which has an interesting twist to it. It's different than other presentations of Judaism, and that's perhaps the most modern, the most
Zionist.
Zionist. An incorporation of the Zionist movement, which was a political movement, incorporating it into a way of living religion in our day. Right? My Zionism comes from a religious place. So it's not just a political movement. For me, it's a mitzvah.
And that's Rabbi Cook.
Rabbi Cook, and other rabbis too. But yeah, that's where we get to Rabbi Cook, right? So that's interesting. Nowadays, you find a lot of Rabbi Cook followers, religious Zionist followers, who also study Hasidut and live Hasidut, myself included. And I appreciate the teachings of the Hasidic movement, like I appreciate the teachings of Rav Kook and his students. And it's not mutually exclusive. In some places, of course, we seem to have this problem of being very sectarian.
Is that already?
So that's it. We seem to be very sectarian, and you choose, are maybe part of this group or part of that group. I try to avoid that. Obviously, I have chosen to dress like the religious Zionists, and not like Chabad Hasidim, who wear the fedoras and the black and white. But there's other groups too, and ultimately, I think those are all external things. The main thing is we should find a way to connect to God and to live our Judaism in this world, in this era, in the best way possible. And there's very valuable teachings in all these different camps. Try to take the best from both. But you do, sorry?
Echad.
Echad, that's right, unity. Sat Hashem. We didn't say much about the parsha, but we did talk about Yat Kislev. Yat, Yud Tet, 19th of Kislev, that's Shabbat. So they call this festival Yat Kislev Festival. And it's primarily promoted by Chabad Hasidim because of their Rebbe being released from jail. But it does have its root in that's the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, which is the founder of the entire Hasidic movement, which I put it in context for you. I put it in context a little bit of this chart of Jewish historical framework of the Jewish tradition. Ezrat Hashem, next week we'll get back and finish off the halachot of Chanukah. We still don't know exactly where to light the candles and when to light the candles. We'll continue with that Ezrat Hashem on Sunday. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.